Good now, revolutionaries, and welcome to the Rise Up Morning Show. Happy Tuesday. It's March 25th, unless you're listening in the future, in which case, wherever you are, whenever you listen, we hope that it's green. And we are so glad to be here with you for helpful news, commentary, and of course, answers to your crypto questions. If you're just seeing us for the first time, welcome. You're in for a treat. We are joined today by our handsome, in both places, friend, Spade of Neutron. We're going to have a conversation about his journey, first at Lido, now at Neutron, becoming full-time Web3, something people used to ask us about all the time, right, Alex? How do you do it? What even is it? Does it actually exist?
Just had one yesterday.
Turns out the answer is yes, and it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with OnlyFans unless you're Will Watson.
Ew.
Only chins.
Man. Only chins.
only chins, yeah.
So if you've got a crypto question, then leave it in the comments. Definitely check out Spade at 0xSpade over on X. And if you want to get ahead of where we're going, then also be sure to check out neutron_org on X while we welcome Spade to the studio. Spade, thank you for joining us today. Do you want to take a second and tell the folks in the audience just who you are and what you do in the Web3 space?
Sure. Thanks for having me first. It's great to see all of you guys and get a chance to indulge in some banter. I'm Spade, also know, like my real name is Avril. I'm the CEO of Hadron Labs, which is a software development company that works on the Neutron network. TLDR is like what we do is we customize the chain itself to make DeFi actually work, basically, and to make it like way more, accessible and profitable for people to engage in, like safer and such.
Okay, and you started. I kind of like to just jump right in here. You started your journey like working in crypto as a contributor in the Lido community.
Yeah, so basically, I was working as an investigative journalist before going into crypto, and what brought me into the space was I really liked the idea of like, hey, we can take the financial system and we can like make it trustless, abstract like all the middlemen and such, and that's sort of like what initially piqued my interest. And so I started getting on chain, and with DeFi Summer, there were a bunch of like these new entities, like these DAOs kind of like appearing, and they needed contributors to help with a whole bunch of things because they were growing way faster than sort of like their contributor base and like their muscles, right? And so I started engaging on chain with a bunch of these DAOs, and eventually, like there was this forum post by one of the contributors that were like, "Hey, we're going to upgrade this protocol to do X, Y, and Z," and the last line said, "If you think you have skills that we could use, like just reach out." So I did. So I told them about like my background and such. We had a couple of calls, and it turned out that the Lido on Terra team at the time, so like Lido is this like big protocol on Ethereum. It also has a deployment on, it had a deployment on a blockchain called Terra, and which at the time was huge. And the team that was in charge of that was 11 developers, and that's it. Which meant that there were nobody to do, to basically like gather feedback from the community, help communicate what they were up to and such, and that was a big problem for them at the time. So I joined the team initially as a community manager, and really quickly realized that like, there were a bunch of things beyond just community management to do. And so I started taking on the marketing and the business development and the strategy and stuff. And so a couple of like, like a quarter or so later, Konstantin Lemashuk, which is kind of like the co-founder of P2P Validator and a bunch of these like really impressive companies in the space, kind of like stepped in and was like, hey, we want there to be somebody who manages this team, who is kind of like acting as the CEO of it, and we'd like you to have a shot, basically. Like, are you in? And so I said, yes, that'd be an honor. And, fast forward a couple of years, we've now spun out of P2P fully to create the Neutron network. I co-founded the Hadron Labs company, as well as like, contributed to the genesis of the network and such. So it's been a wild ride.
It's been a wild ride, and it's what I like the best about it is, it sounds like you were in journalism that was like your career before doing this, yeah?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a pivot, but not really. Go ahead, Will.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, like it is a pretty big pivot that you see on paper where it's from journalism to CEO of decentralized finance focused project, right? So, and that's one of the biggest questions I think a lot of people have out the gate too, which is I love crypto, but my resume does not match the skill set of what I think I need to know about crypto. And clearly,
like that's a really good question. But
clearly,
like,
you made that.
Sure, I think there's two things. Yeah, I think there's two things to note here. Like the first one is, this industry needs a wide array of talent, right? Not everybody needs to be a software engineer, right? Like that is very important, but there are a bunch of other functions to make this industry function that are required, right? And so, in my case, the skills I had was I have years of experience digging into very, very complex topics and being able to like talk about them in a way that's like, more understandable and such, and being able to like do that research, communicate clearly, and that kind of stuff, right? And so that was valuable because nobody in the team at the time was able to do that work in the first place, right? So just to give you an example, that like there are other skills that matter basically, and most likely, regardless of what your current career is, there are probably skills that are applicable to the space that you could use, right?
Yep.
The second thing is, most of this industry, like this industry is very nascent, it's very new. And that means that like, if you look at like other industries, right, like marketing in Web2 is something that you have, playbooks that have been refined over decades that you're supposed to know and know how to apply, right? In crypto, there's a lot of like figuring out left, right? And so while on the consensus, like, consensus algorithm design and like, distributed system side, you have this kind of like wide literature, like years and years of kind of like progress on when it comes to like how to do marketing and how to do business development in crypto. Like there's a lot of like innovation and figuring out left to do. And so like that is a chance for you to basically like come in and so like try to figure things out, develop your own playbooks, and sort of like grow from there, if that makes sense, right? Like you learn alongside with the space, right?
Mm-hmm. And actually, I feel like this might be a good way. We had a question in the chat here, and you'll be the perfect person to answer. What are some of the ways, you say we'll need all skills, what are some of the ways that this like massive technologies that we call Web3 are going to make the world different? We talk a lot about the financialization, the tokenization, but if I'm a teacher, if I'm a parent, what are some of the ways, we talk about it a lot on our show, but I'd love to know what you think, Spade, what you tell people when you're painting that picture of the future for them. How will it be different for everyday people?
I think depending on which part of the industry you look like, the answer can be slightly, like you look at, the answer can be slightly different because different projects try to tackle different aspects of it. What we do is, when we look at the traditional financial system, what we see is that like a lot of it is actually, like the best opportunities are kind of not accessible to everyday people, right? Like you probably have never invested in a hedge fund, and
right.
That is,
I do that all the time. What are you talking about? You guys talk.
Well, good for you, man. But like, Medallion Fund doesn't want to take my money.
Schmillion Schmatzen is here.
This is a gross misrepresentation of the facts.
That's my very, very wealthy alter ego that Evan created. But anyway, sorry, continue.
If you get your deals, like let me know. I'm down. But the TL here is that like today, and especially in the context of like inflation and such, like both the money you already have is not something that is something that can be threatened depending on where you're living. So like a couple of examples, right? Like I live in Thailand, I have family in Thailand, but I'm originally from France, right? And so I do transfers across borders like every month, basically, right? Mm-hmm. The way that you would do this traditionally is like with Wise, and that's like $70 every time you do a transfer, right? With crypto, I do this monthly for like 6 cents or something like this. So that's the first benefit, right? And so just like making sure that people have access to their finance in a way that's like global, that doesn't have the friction, that is like, instantaneous and stuff. All of this is like already pretty valuable. The second thing is just like the way that the traditional financial system is built is fairly gate-kept, such that if you're already rich, you have access to way more opportunities to build wealth than if you don't have that like wealth already, right? And so like what we're trying to do is like make make these opportunities to build wealth over time in like a sustainable compounding way, like way more accessible and manageable for people to basically consider and have access to. And that doesn't mean like gambling, right? Like gambling is fine. Like people, like, I mean, like people want to speculate because for a lot of people that's an opportunity to build some wealth really rapidly, and a lot of people are like interested into this, and that's fine. So what we do there is we try to build the fairest markets such that you don't have like Citadel turning off the buy or sell button when they don't like the trades you're making, like it happened with GME, right? So on the one hand, building fair markets that are efficient for you, that don't rug you or tip the scales against you, and two, giving you access to the best opportunities possible, such that if you're on the more conservative long-term side, you're able to build wealth gradually over the years and have access to all of these opportunities that traditionally you wouldn't.
Yeah, and one other thing, and I don't think we talk about this enough because it's not something that a lot of people realize, but the more money that you have, and this is talking about the traditional financial system, the more money you have, the more money you are given. Money begets money. And what I mean by that is like you can get a loan dirt cheap at a dirt cheap interest rate if you have a lot of money because the bank trusts you to do good things with that. However, you probably are in definitely less need of that lower rate than somebody who's just really trying to get started, who get hit with a higher rate because the bank doesn't know if they can trust them with a lot of money yet. And so it's kind of like it's because of a risk management strategy from the world of traditional finance. And as a result, people with less money get hit with larger rates than people with more money. And there's so many more examples of that. Whereas in the DeFi world, fuck that, get rid of that. And everybody just gets access to the same rates and everybody can see what everybody's getting. You know, it's a beautiful thing.
If you're just joining us, our guest is Spade, 0x Spade of Neutron, and we're talking about how to break into the Web3 industry. But I'd really like to pivot away from the journey you took here and figure out what you're doing now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Neutron?
Sure. So I guess a good way to put it is this, right? Like DeFi started in like 2020, DeFi summer and everything, right? And we created all of these mechanisms on chain that allow you to like do things like trading and lending and borrowing and such. But what we continue to see though is that like most of the activity, most of the trading, most of the volumes continue to happen on centralized platforms, right? Why is that? Well, it's kind of because there are two things that have constrained DeFi in the space and prevented it from like being a fundamentally better alternatives than what already existed, right? And on the one hand, you have kind of like the sheer performance of these systems. This is broadly getting solved in the industry. Like rollups and like things like Solana, Aptos, and whatever are kind of like helping push the boundaries towards where you can't see the difference between a really fast blockchain and a centralized exchange. Binance, for example, is 14 milliseconds of latency, right? A lot of blockchains are going to get in there within the next few like quarters or years, basically. The other thing is expressivity, right? For example, when you're trading in basically anything else in finance, you're trading on an order book, right? But if you're trading on crypto, you're probably using an AMM, right? Why are we using these pools? Is it because they're fundamentally better? Not really. It's more so because they worked within the constraints of the system that we had with decentralized blockchains early on, right? And so what Neutron does is we look at these constraints and we lift them such that you can build DeFi mechanisms, like financial mechanisms, that are much more efficient and that are able to actually provide users with guarantees that are at least the same as kind of like alternative offering or even better, right? So we have this like, in protocol order book and oracles and automation features and such that allow us to build really efficient kind of like market designs, lending and borrowing, and like basically to provide more capital efficient designs such that you can do more with your money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask is in terms of how people can get involved with what you're doing. I know you have started on Cosmos. You've got the Mercury upgrade coming soon, so you're kind of doing your own chain thing. I imagine that'll be a time of much growth, opportunity. If people are interested in learning more or interested in starting to participate, what's the best way to do it? And does your team need like help? Do you need people to amplify what you're doing? Do you need people to explain what you're doing? Do you need technical help? Those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think a good, the best way to keep track on the project is probably just follow us on Twitter, and we announce like a bunch of programs there for people to get involved, right? Like, for example, we recently announced the Neutron's Creator Program, which is basically meant to support folks who want to like help us amplify like the work that we do by providing them as much context and information and knowledge as possible, supporting them financially and everything, right? So like if you're interested in helping us on this one, like check that program out.
Okay.
And generally speaking, we involved our community a lot in like the roadmap of the project, as well as just like the all of the work and the ecosystem building that is happening on the Neutron blockchain. And so, you can join our community channels like on Telegram, on Discord and such. And, we're in these channels basically, so you can add us and like suggest your ideas, get involved and such. Those would be good ways to get started, I think.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Well, thank you very much. I am aware that you got to stop at the hour. So what I'd like to do is I'd love to pivot to answering some of your crypto questions. If you've got a question for Spade, if you've got a question for us, let us know. Alex, I know that one of the things we wanted to talk about today was a question we got from our friend Magic, and maybe Spade can give some input on this as well before we let him ride his dog and pony off into the sunset. Do you want to tell people what we're talking about and kind of lay the table for this? It's a great topic.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that gets talked about a lot in this kind of market stage is, should I do any kind of portfolio restructuring? And if yes, what's the best way to do it? And am I just panicking? Am I overreacting? Am I thinking about this the right way? Kind of all of the different soup of emotions that goes into this decision to potentially do some restructuring. We talk a lot of the time about how, obviously you don't want to just see prices fall, panic, and sell a bunch of stuff at a loss. This stuff is hyper volatile. More often than not, things recover, especially in the short term, even if you are taking more of a short-term gamble on something. So this question I thought was really good. And let me grab the full text of it here, because this particular person has given what I think to be a pretty solid amount of thought into it and kind of cut the portfolio up and, had some thoughts about it. And I guess one more piece of context, we've been talking a lot about how it's okay to do things when positions are underwater, because we're talking about kind of a percentage game here. So if you have, for example, 2 positions, you have long-term conviction in one, you're wavering on the other, they're both down, X percent kind of overall. Consolidating at that point is just like trading them together in a profit, if that's kind of how you're looking at it. So, keeping percentages separate from maybe your actual entry price.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little about numbers here. So you might want to get a pen and paper out, and I'm gonna get mine too. Really quick, Alex, too, while you're
Luckily.
pulling this up, let me say this comes from the Rise Up Discord. If you want to ask us a question and you don't want it to disappear after the show is over, or you're frustrated by the character limits on Twitter or on TikTok, the best place to get our attention is in the Rise Up Discord server. And if you're like, wow, I've never joined a Discord before, that seems a little intimidating, then the workaround is you can head to our website. It's available in all of our bios, theriseupmorningshow.com. And we've got the link to the server right on the front page. And we've got a little neat Discord help button that takes you to a handy dandy video tutorial that'll walk you through it. If you're nervous, don't be. Everybody there is very friendly. And there are great questions like this one.
So basically here, I'm going to give you the quick overview. So
Okay.
the status is this particular individual entered into the crypto space, as they said, jumping off a cliff backwards into crypto mid-December.
I love that analogy.
Which I enjoy as we explore new ways to say how overwhelming it is to join this space right off the bat. We've been usually saying it's like drinking from a fire hose, and one of my friends recently described it to me as
That's so much
jumping
better,
into a
though.
river. And I was like, okay, I like that one. I might be pivoting to jumping in. So we're kicking it up a notch with jumping backwards off a cliff.
I love it. Good start.
Current status, converting some things to USDC that I have no conviction in, parentheses, because of influencer FOMO, and the areas where I'm over leveraged is more the part that I'm stumped on. So example, have, let's say, $1,000 in Arrow, which is currently down $250. So 25%. Would it be better to convert like 500 of those dollars into stable coins with a more long-term outlook for the remaining balance to double back or, re-enter at a lower spot? Or would you just rotate completely out and pivot to something that you have a better long-term conviction in. And the examples there are Bitcoin, Chainlink, Avalanche, Solana, Ethereum, and Ondo, which we've got more conviction in, but are still also down 20 to 25%, except for Bitcoin. And these are from entries. The other assets wanting to de-risk are Sui, Arrow, Near, Tau, Super, Beam, and Jasmy. And I hope you remembered all those because there will be a test at the end.
Oh, damn.
I got most of them.
I got Near, Tau, Jasmy, Beam. Okay.
Down in a range between 28 and 48%, with a slightly green position in Cardano and XRP. Honestly, just because it was cheap, hoping for 3 to 5x before May, learning enough things to question that conviction. But like everyone else, overall portfolio is currently down. Where I'm at is that in this investment journey, I would like to have the capital to make my decisions more confidently, parentheses, limit orders, understanding the state of the current market trends, et cetera. Kind of a bunch of the stuff that we talk about, you need to take into consideration. But I'm okay taking some of a loss on some assets just to have peace of mind. So I think here we're also hitting on another really good thing that was one of my biggest level ups, which was you might be in a position that could potentially, with risk, pay off eventually. But if you're sitting here just like stressing out the whole time and losing sleep and aging rapidly and getting more and more gray hair every day, taking years off your life, it's probably not worth it. And so I am curious. So Spade is the guest. So I'll kick it to you first. First of all, when you're talking about restructuring, does anything jump out from this example as being like a big yes or a big no, red or green flags that you might notice? And then, how would you kind of handle this if someone handed you a platter with, and I can run you back through anything if you need a reminder, but
I put the notes on the screen there, the cliff notes.
Perfect.
So I would say my first thought would be like, so it doesn't seem like there's any leverage involved in this, which is pretty good. But just generally, as a general note, like if you are not comfortable about your liquidity position, like if there's anything in your life that you might need some of that like money for in the coming like months and such, I would strongly consider maybe potentially like taking a small loss. And the reason being, you never want to be in a position where you're forced to sell, because like when you're in that position, you will be selling at the worst possible prices that you could imagine, right? And so like being forced to sell because one, you had a leverage position that is getting liquidated, or because you just need the money in real life and you have to pull from crypto, but actually, the prices are not great right now, is like the worst you can do. So if you're in that situation, probably take some money off of the table, put it in like stable coins, farm something reasonably safe. Like there's a bunch of like good opportunities, like look at Morpho on Ethereum, look at some of the vaults on Mars, on Neutron. There's good opportunities for you in this space. I would say there's kind of like 3 things to take into account when like looking at like portfolio constructions in crypto, right? Like the first thing to note is like rising tide lifts all boat, right? Most of these assets trade extremely in extreme correlation with one another, and so you're basically at the whim of like, is crypto doing good or not, right? And so build basically your general outlook based on that, right? Now, another point of context that is maybe useful is that like we're likely in the last few innings of the bull market, and it has been a brutal bull market for most alts. Most alts have not seen a beat this cycle, but Bitcoin has, right? And so, if you have a Bitcoin position and such, I would probably keep like continue holding on to that. Like more lower rank alts, I would potentially like consider whether or not I have conviction on them. The other 2 things that I would consider is basically, okay, one, is this project, does this project have fundamentals that back the valuation that it currently has, right? If a project is making a shit ton of money because it has actual traction of like people purchasing a service and such, right? Then that is a much more comfortable hold than a project that is just like, there's a lot of speculation about future growth and perspective and usage and stuff, which the project has not grown into yet, right? If it has fundamentals, I would probably just I would probably just hold on to that, because like those fundamentals will sort of like keep it afloat going forward, and or like prompt it for a recovery eventually. And then the last thing is just how good is the team and community at just engineering hype, right? Was this whole like hype driven and such? Like if they're really good, that's kind of like bullish in the sense that like they may be able to do it again, basically, and like pump from here, right? But if it's mostly hype driven and there seems to be like kind of like the momentum has been lost and stuff, like I would probably consolidate that, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
As a general disclaimer, I'm not a professional trader, so take everything that I say with like a massive grain of salt. And I tend to be way more hands-off than I used to be. Like I used to be very degen, like doing like arbitrage and leverage looping on like a bunch of different assets and such. I don't do that. I just don't have the time anymore. And so my portfolio right now is pretty bland. It's kind of like a few majors, a bunch of stablecoins farming like somewhere, and then like a few assets that I think are like criminally undervalued, like NTRN and a couple of others, basically. And so yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. So I don't have any comments on like the specific assets, unfortunately.
It was good. It's good stuff, and you're definitely among friends. I think all of us have relatively, some people would say, bland portfolios.
Yeah.
Hey,
no,
I
right.
had another coin for a little bit yesterday and then sold it for a profit.
Yeah, but it was Cardano, dude.
Yeah, it was Cardano.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah.
No, I
I think an
overall-
important thing is like you kind of wanna make a clear distinction in your mind between like things you hold for the long term because you have conviction on like this project, like and its ability to grow and such, and things you do because you think like right now the market is kind of like well set up for it to have a pump, right? Like these short-term kind of like trades, like I think failing fast and accepting that maybe your short-term thesis was wrong is probably a good thing, just to preserve capital more so than like yeah, that would be my approach.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I would necessarily add to that approach, other than because I look at this and there was that one question also where it's like, hey, I have $1,000 in Aerodrome, it's down 25% right now. And the question was, should I take all of that and put it into plays I have more conviction in, like Bitcoin, Chainlink, Solana, and Ondo, or do I take half of that position?
I probably
Like-
wouldn't buy Ondo.
Yeah,
I'll just
no,
say
you
that.
wouldn't.
I wouldn't. I think they have a great business, but I don't understand why the valuation is where it is. I think that is
Well,
likely to
it's
potentially
crypto.
Right,
The
exactly.
valuation of these companies is kind of
Yeah,
a
but like
fugazi.
your investment thesis being it's crypto is probably not super solid hold long term.
Exactly.
I,
I mean,
I
yeah,
would dig into that with
100%.
Ondo. I'd be curious to know. So Ondo's at like a $2 billion market cap, which is small for crypto, but big anywhere, and or big-ish enough to be considered. But they've got the Biddle Fund that they are in tandem with. They're really in bed with Securitize, and I feel like if you did a quick back of the napkin math, I would say I would expect that the actual total assets that they are tokenizing or offering, it's more than anybody else in the real world asset space in terms of proof in the pudding. I'd be curious to know what your pushback or your thought is. Is it just you still think it's way too overvalued in relation to the value they provide the market?
I will say I picked up on this one because I think there has been a lot of like excitement and such lately, which generally speaking I take as a sign of caution with regards to valuations, because like eventually the momentum kind of like slows down and such. I think the main thing is like, okay, Ondo has like $1 billion of TVL right now, right? Like how much of that are they actually making in like revenue, right? How much of that value like accrues to the token and such, or could potentially accrue to the token in the future, right? Like my understanding is that like RWAs generally speaking are not like super high yield, and so like is that like a 4 billion, like a 4% like treasuries, or maybe 10% in a good case, right? Like how much of that is like goes into like fees and stuff, right? Like I'm saying that they probably have a really great business. I think this is like a really solid like the sector to be in, especially at that scale and such, right? But like, is it going to hold like $2 billion like valuation? Like, it's always hard to tell, right? Like, I think one of the trend that maybe is more interesting than my thought on like a specific project that I haven't like looked deeply into is like what we see is like crypto overall as like if you calculate the multipliers between what the protocols are making and what the valuation of the assets are, you see all across the boards like absolutely insane multipliers, right?
Oh yeah.
But what's been interesting to see is that as the space matures and as more institutions and like folks who have this experience of like doing this kind of like analysis of like the financials of different like projects and protocols and teams and companies enter into the space, we see a sort of like gradual normalization of these multipliers towards probably what you know, kind of like the broader financial system sees as kind of like averages and such, right? And so like I don't, like that's not something that I would trade on in a short term, but over the next like 5 years or so, that's something that I expect will play out. Basically, I think a lot of the kind of like extremely high valuations will sort of like start to normalize back down to like basically based on like their actual performances as businesses and their outlooks, right? And so yeah, like I would consider that mostly for your long-term holds, basically.
Well said. Very well said. Will, I kind of took it on a sidebar away from you were still making a point about getting back from arrow losses
the error position
into something with higher conviction.
Yeah, it's just remember, you don't have to do anything, you know, whole hog, if you will, if you don't understand that saying, anybody and everybody who's not American. You don't have to go every like 100% and everything, right? If you're worried about something, odds are your emotions are tied into it, and emotions tend to make financial investing mistakes. So you can pull back a little bit here. And one of the ideas was, you know, if you have less conviction in Aerodrome for whatever reason, you can put it into, you can take half of it and put it into a higher conviction play. You can totally do that if you feel better about that. You feel like you're in a better emotional place to then approach the market and continue to analyze. You're probably going to end up making yourself more money, even if Aerodrome ends up on paper on a chart having higher multiples. But you might not be in a great emotional foundational place to be able to really execute your strategy and profit off of that, because your emotions are ping-ponging more and more. But if you're in a more emotional, stable place, you might be more likely to execute your strategy and therefore actually be in a position where at the end of the day, you made more money than if you had done the opposite. So that was just the advice that I wanted to give there. And then going off of what Spade mentioned with, you know, take a look at coins that have great fundamental strength. Aerodrome's making a ton of money and their TVL growth is really, really good. Their tokenomics aren't the greatest. It's a very inflationary coin, so take that into account. But if you look at Aerodrome and you're trying to look at coins that have good fundamental growth, Aerodrome has very good fundamental growth, and it's within Base, which has its TVL, the amount of money on chain is going up. So definitely some things to consider.
Spade, one of the questions I always like to ask our guests is if you have any like high signal resources or educational tools that you advocate for that you think helped you or help other folks. We talk about Coinbase Learn as a good kind of one-stop shop. I'm a big fan of the Unchained podcast, for example. But I feel like, you know, there's just so much good stuff out there for people who like to learn all kinds of different ways. What comes to mind? Any thoughts?
That's a good question. I don't think I have a great resource to recommend off the bat. I think, okay, here's the alpha. So I think, you know, and I think this is worth both for trading and both for like getting into crypto, actually. Like, you know, how we were talking about like the fact that like compared to Web2, like the industry is like less mature and stuff. One of the things that doesn't happen for most people, which is so surprising, is most people don't even read books about what happened before, right? Like the industry has reinvented the wheel a number of times, and this is a symptom of like people not actually doing research deeply into like what existed before, right? Similar in like trading and financial assessment of assets, right? There's a whole wealth of insight and alpha that you can get for yourselves simply by reading books. It costs you $10. You can get it on like, you know, whatever platform you like, and it'll take you a couple of hours and you'll get like basically a massive advantage over whoever else is participating that is not putting that effort, right? I think like that's probably like, there's a bunch of like really great crypto resources out there. I don't necessarily have like a great recommendation to give off the bat, but I would say like, look at really good books that talk about these topics and just read them. And like the insight you will get there, I think will help propel you to a stage where you have way more insight and some advantage on like the other like players in the space, basically.
I've got it on the shelf behind me right about here. I don't think anybody's going to be able to see it, but one of my favorite books for our space was by Chris Dixon. He wrote Read, Write, Own recently, and it's meant to be a sort of brief history of the internet, networks, and computing in the context of what is Web3. You know, this internet thing is not different necessarily. It's you know, the internet, but it's got some new features that will allow you to own for the first time information that matters to you, like your money. Good tip.
I just did a quick scan of my bookshelf to see if there was anything relevant, and the first thing that I see is the zombie apocalypse survival handbook that Mel Brooks' son wrote.
Yeah. I read that too.
Many years ago. He came to Northern Michigan when I was that's a great one right there.
The hard thing about hard things is what Spade showed on screen there.
I haven't read that one, but I have heard enough people talk about it to where it's made it onto a short list.
We've also got a couple Recs in the audience that say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Richest Man in Babylon, History of Money, and The Creature from Jekyll Island.
A
bunch of really good Recs there.
Yeah.
I was just to put a cherry on top of the whole portfolio consolidation management kind of, you know, reconstruction thing. I think the warning I would give, I think all the stuff you guys talked about, the more kind of specifics and nitty gritty is great. I don't want to rehash that. I would simply say, if you're looking at your portfolio and it's down and you're like, I should probably be doing something, but you're not quite sure what. First of all, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, maybe just don't look at the portfolio.
Yeah.
First, make sure you don't need the money. And if you don't need the money and you have the luxury of waiting, then maybe just stop looking at it.
Read my mind. That's exactly where I'm going. Don't feel pressured to do things just because you feel like you are in a uniquely bad position. So just remember that there's only really a few reasons that I would ever pull money out of something at a loss. One, I no longer have faith or conviction in the asset, not just because the price is down, but because of other contributing factors. Something happened on the team. There was a massive shuffle. Look at something like Gala is a great example. Overall, still bullish on Web3 gaming as a niche, but Gala has just been full of drama, infighting, lawsuits.
What are you talking about? They've been super stable as an organization,
right. And haven't added anything new to the space or the niche in a long ass time. So like conviction has dropped heavily. That is one example. So think about it that way. So loss of conviction in the asset for more than just the price being down. Two, like Spade said, do you need the money for living expenses? Are you over invested and over leveraged? Did you go in with more than you could actually afford to lose, and now you're learning the hard way that shit, I actually could not afford to do that? That's a painful lesson to learn, and unfortunately, there's probably not a lot of ways out of that one if you need it, if you need that money. So that might be a tough pill to swallow, but you know that would be another reason. And then
quick note on this, like if you're playing around with money that you may need, like, you know, first, never invest in, especially in crypto assets, which are extremely volatile. Never invest money you can't afford to lose. But if you have money that you're kind of like in between, like you probably don't need it, but actually you might, then go for like very stable, low risk, long-term like yield position, not like investments into volatile assets. Like go for like, you know, lend like stable coins on like a reputable platform that is like audited, like secure and such. Maybe consider some of the delta neutral positions and such. Like there's a bunch of options for you.
What does that mean, delta neutral? Will you define that?
Yeah, delta neutral is when you achieve. Basically, it's like if I buy one Bitcoin, I now have 1x exposure to the price of Bitcoin, right? Price of Bitcoin goes up, I make money. Price of Bitcoin goes down, I lose money, right? Now, maybe I want to hold that asset, but I actually don't want to be exposed to the price of that asset. In that case, I can hedge that exposure by taking a 1x short exposure to the price of Bitcoin.
I see what you're saying.
In which case, because like, you know, 1x long, 1x short, it sort of cancels each other. And so I achieve what's called delta neutrality, which means that I don't really care about the price in the markets anymore, because regardless of whether they go up or down, my position is going to be worth the same, right? So that's something you can consider for existing positions. For example, if you have an asset that you're like not too sure about, but want to keep it, you can consider hedging it. It tends to be expensive and complicated to do manually, because you have to like adjust your position and such. But there are good packaged strategies that basically offer this as like a part of it, right? Like, for example, you're probably familiar with Athena. Athena is a protocol that does one such trade, right? They hold a yield-bearing version of ETH, right, like staked ETH from Lido, and they short ETH on perpetuals on centralized exchanges, right? And so what they do is like they have 1x long exposure to ETH, 1x short exposure to ETH, which means they're overall delta neutral. You don't expect the price to affect the value of your position, but they're collecting yield on both sides of that trade, and that's what they sort of like distribute to their holders, right? There's a bunch of projects and protocols that sort of like automate that trade for you now. So depending on which asset you're interested in and what kind of yield and stuff, like you can also look into these, right? Mars protocol is an interesting one in that sense, because it's the only protocol in crypto that allows you to do that trade like within, like basically in a fully decentralized manner on chain within one protocol. Because like basically Mars allows you to do two things, which is one, hold any amount, like any different assets as collateral, like, you know, yield bearing derivatives, like liquid staking tokens and such, use them as collateral, but also use that collateral to open perpetuals position, right? So
This
you can
is
hold
Marsh
the asset.
Capital?
Mars, like the planet.
Okay. Mars Capital. Sorry.
It's
to interrupt. Keep going. I
Mars
just wanted to pull it up.
_ protocol on Twitter. Mars underscore protocol. And so what they do is like, you know, you can go in and let's say, for example, like, you know, you're bullish on Celestia, right? You can take TIA, you can liquid stake it, for example, with Drop protocol, which is a liquid staking protocol backed by Lido. Now you're earning like 8% per year on staking rewards on TIA, right? You can then use that liquid staking token and put it into Mars as collateral and open a short position on Celestia, right? So now you have 1x exposure to TIA long due to the fact that you're holding some. You also have 1x short exposure from your perpetuals position, right? So you're delta neutral. You're no longer earning or losing from the market price, but you're collecting the staking rewards on your LST, and you're collecting if like the funding rates on the perpetuals position as well.
Yeah, that's
Very
cool.
That's
Can I
a
just
great
point out
strategy.
real quick, because I love it, that Mars protocol on Twitter only follows one account, and it's the official NASA account for the planet Mars.
Oh yeah.
No way. That's fantastic. Ding. Okay. And I see they're on 12 markets, including Neutron. So
And really,
very cool.
really quick, that was a tremendous explanation and breakdown, but it was about 99% jargon. And I have absolutely no doubt that there's a significant handful of people. No, don't worry.
No, it was
Handful of
fantastic.
people who probably did not understand about 88% of the words that are in there. So really quick, one of the things Spade is describing here is what I would call like generally the DeFi space as you start to level up beyond the entry level.
Probably
right,
level 2 DeFi, level 3.
we take it all the way to the beginning. You know, participating in DeFi at the corest, most simple level is holding the cryptocurrencies that are associated with DeFi protocols. So, you know, if you enjoy Aave, you could just simply hold Aave, and that would be probably the simplest way to get some exposure to something with the asset. From there, it's all about getting more and more involved and leveling up by adding little bits and little bits. So the next step would probably be taking a stable coin and supplying it on Aave for a little bit of interest. So you're earning some yield on a stable asset, and you're kind of able to, it's a very hands-off kind of a thing, right? Your two risks there are that the biggest DeFi protocol on earth goes under and that USDC depegs. So as far as crypto goes, pretty low risk. From there, there's just basically a never-ending amount of ways that you can continue to level that up. And so as Spade's talking about stuff like delta neutral, you know, a lot of jargon in there. That's basically just a way that you can hedge your position, meaning protect yourself from risk by basically doing two things at once, so that price fluctuations in the market don't hit you as hard as they would if you only had exposure to the one thing. And then from there, it just kind of continues to go. All sorts of different kinds of trading, different sorts of platforms and protocols that offer different sorts of things, all with varying degrees of risk to be involved with. One of our friends on TikTok here, who I don't think creates content anymore, unfortunately, is Jeff the Dunker, who is famous for talking about Ponzi-nomics and Ponzi farming. Basically ways that you can move quickly to take advantage of these super sketchy protocols, to take advantage of very high APYs and then get the hell
Don't
out
do
of
it at home, kids.
before
do it
it goes
at home.
under.
Yeah, or
Do
my
you
favorite was,
also want
9
to
times
Ponzi?
looping, taking something out on Curve, then putting it in Lido, then taking it somewhere else. I mean, it was wild.
I just wish that he would have started like an online degen toy store called Ponzi's R Us and just run it with like this constant roving cycle of like various pyramid schemes that you could get involved in, but then like, this big flashing, like, equivalent of the Lunk alarm at Planet Fitness that would just like start flashing when the big red flag of deep pegging or going under starts to go off. Anyway, this is all stuff inside of the space of DeFi. If you're interested in DeFi, there's a never-ending amount of stuff that you can read about it. You just got to kind of dive in. As the comment said, jump backwards off the cliff and start learning the terms.
So you briefly had like integrated Dino on the screen there. I would recommend following this guy. He very frequently will, he'll post threads about like, okay, how I'm constructing XYZ position that is very interesting because it has these rewards and limits these risks and stuff. So if you want to play around with some of these more complex positions while having some more context on like how they're constructed and how to go about them, that's a good follow in my opinion. I would say there's also like another point, like to your point about like there being levels in DeFi. I think there's kind of like a fundamental, like there's kind of like two broad paths you can take when you're like dabbling into the space and looking for like building wealth, basically, right? I would say like buying and holding assets is what I would generally put under the category of speculation. You're making a bet that this asset is going to go up or down and you're hoping to benefit from it, right? This is completely fine. Ideally, when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're doing this on the best platforms and that you're actually, putting as much efforts into making sure your bets are likely correct as possible, right? So like paying attention to like fees and which assets you're investing in are kind of like the key things. There's kind of like another path, which I actually think is better for most people, which is kind of like actually investing, which means like looking for minimized losses that allow you to build wealth gradually over time. It doesn't sound sexy. Most people want to get that 10x because like the dopamine hit of doing that is just insane. But consider the following. Wealth compounds over time, right? If you're earning like 10% this year and you're doing this again next year you're earning 10% on a larger amount of money, right? So you're earning more interest, right? And so your wealth over time goes like this, right? Some have said that like compounding is the like eighth wonder of the world or something.
Yeah.
Yep, it's
Because,
a magical
like,
thing.
Yes, because over sufficiently large periods of time, it will completely outpace whatever you're able to do by, speculating and trying to get like that 10x, which you will generally like most often not get. Because, imagine you're starting today. In 60 years, how much interest would you be getting those interest on top of it, right? Like the speed at which you're making money at this point is just insane, right? And so for most people who aren't kind of like professional traders who have the ability to be tapped into the latest information the fastest than anybody else in the market, because that is what it takes to win consistently, right? If you don't have access to this, consider like investing and building positions in things that are way lower risk, that you don't have the risk of losing your entire principal every 5 minutes, but that that you're going to be making incremental gains over time, because like these will compound. And over like, the next 5 years, 10 years, you'll actually have achieved meaningful gains, right? One example build an understanding of this is like, so Warren Buffett is the richest, like one of the richest men on the planet, right? I believe he's been investing for like 60 something years,
60
right?
or 70 years now at this point.
Yeah. And he's gotten there by achieving like what was it, like 20%, like 15, 20%
Year-over-year,
APR. Yeah, year over
Beating
year,
the
right?
market, but
It's not-
slightly.
Exactly.
Well, I mean,
right? Like
that was
he's
more
like,
than doubling the market because, S&P 500
Yeah.
got you 7%. Now it gets you like 8 or 9, but, it was like 76% was good for the year.
yes. But then consider the guy who founded the Medallion Fund, right? The Medallion Fund is a hedge fund, so like a fund that like specializes in very complex strategies to try and get like as much as they can, right? They use a bunch of complicated math and stuff, but it is kind of like a legendary fund because it returns 60% year over year for years, right? It's considered the best hedge fund in the history of mankind, basically. But the guy who founded that, while he outperformed Warren Buffett like by 3x, like every year, he'd only been doing it for like 20, 30 years. I don't remember the exact starting date. And so he's like way he's not as rich basically as a result of this, just because he didn't have enough nearly as much time in the game, basically, right?
Well, and even
if he had started around the same time as Warren Buffett with these kinds of performance, the compounding games means that he wouldn't have billions of dollars, he would have trillions of dollars. This is the difference in compounding. Like if you start to like look a bit further and consider compounding into your calculus, maybe you won't be rich tomorrow morning, but you can build wealth for like your whole life that will achieve like way more meaningful and way more predictable results for you, basically.
And Warren Buffett himself says, he made 99% of his wealth after 50 because of compounding. So Spade, I know you got to go. I would love to get a wrap up one more time of where people can find you. Give us the tagline for what's coming up with Neutron. And then if you've got a final thought, a question, suggestion, good joke, ask of our audience, a word of wisdom, something like that, then we'd love to hear it, man.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I guess like you can find me on Twitter, like 0x Spade, as well as, neutron_org. On Twitter as well. Those are like great places to connect. Feel free to like add us or join the community channels as well to like have a chat. We're very open to that. We encourage it actually. And then about Neutron, it's like what we're trying to do is like we're trying to enable developers to, I like to put it as build the impossible, right? Like there are so many constraints left on the space, like on Ethereum, on Solana, and whatever. Like these things are like they're good, decentralized, they're secure. The constraints that they impose on like developers and the products that they can bring to users are insane. And our job, what we do at Neutron is like we try to lift these constraints to enable better applications, better financial primitives for users, right? And so if you're interested in like trying out those primitives which allow you to have like consistent wealth building, like these kinds of like positions that we talked about, like check out the ecosystem, because that is all what we focus on a lot, basically, like creating these things that allow people to actually manage their risk, build wealth over time, and make it, rather than just like be stuck in the rat race, if that makes sense. That is what we're trying to bring to the industry by enabling people to build fundamentally better designed. And so if that resonates with you, like check out the project, learn about it, get engaged. We're always looking to like support folks who show up and like show excitement about like helping us like deliver on that vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate you making time to talk about it, to share so much with our audience. If there's anything that we can do to help you, let us know. And hopefully we'll have you back in a little while and see how things are going. Yeah.
That sounds great. And thanks for having me. I'll drop one last thing, which is there might be a really sick opportunity dropping in that ecosystem like in the coming month. The keyword is max BTC, and I'll just say this: it's the highest organic yield you can get on Bitcoin. It's not live yet, but
Ooh,
max
keep an eye out for
BTC.
it. Correct. Yes, it's called max BTC because it's the max yield on Bitcoin.
that makes sense.
Pretty straightforward, right?
The perfect name. Okay,
On the
good.
nose, I like it.
Thank you for the alpha at the end, and thank you again for making time to join us, ladies and gentlemen. Our friend Spade. Spade, have a great
Thank you very
day,
much.
a great night,
dude.
and we'll
Nice
catch
meeting you,
you
man.
soon. Bye for now.
Take care, folks.
Yeah, great.
Got some alpha drop there at the end.
Max BTC earning yield on my Bitcoin.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Coming to you first from the Rise Up Media Company.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about that? What a lovely fellow. And
Yeah,
I've
great.
got to say, I have not seen anybody pull off blonde highlights quite like that with the swoop in a minute.
No.
I also
My
had a similar
11
thought.
and 12-year-old self would have been like, I would have been like, this is the coolest guy in the world. And he still is the coolest guy in the world, but
As you're wearing your Green Day shirt. This is yeah.
Right. My stud, I was like,
The
dude,
heart hand
I-
grenade.
my hair was too
cover,
curly to do that. And all I wanted was the swoop. man.
Tonight'll be the night I will fall.
If
that
you-
was almost Evan.
If
That
you've
was
got
almost
that-
heaven.
Oh my
You,
god.
you should have seen me in high school. Don't come for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I bet Alex had that. Christina, Linda, can we get some pictures of
Yeah,
that,
you're.
please?
Yeah, no, I could totally believe that you had that look.
I'll
We're
find,
gonna
I'll
have to
find
do
I
that,
need
that
those
too.
pictures.
I've
Let's
got
get some high
floating
school
around.
pictures. Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
just
for a
say-
show.
Hair was straightened.
Eyes were blackened.
No, actually, never went that far.
Wow.
no,
Nails
never
were
did.
purple.
I had some real skinny
Didn't
jeans.
do that either.
Of course you did.
Should have.
Real
But
skinny.
it was the skinniest of jeans in a whole host of vibrant colors. It was the neon studded.
Wait, you
metal
wore
belts
like
and-
a whole host of vibrant colors, like gray and off gray, like just slightly different from the black you're typically
it
always
was
wearing.
it was literally either like aggressive neon or black and nothing in between.
Oh my
Wow,
god.
that would be a interesting sight to see.
Yeah, we'll have pictures, we'll have receipts. If you've got a high school memory, a DeFi discovery, a crypto question to share, this is the place for you. And hey, while we're talking about it, if you are thinking you'd like to have more time with us, then I've got good news. We're live Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time on all the places where you're watching: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn even, and of course on TikTok. We're live Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central for Rise Up After Dark, and we are live 24/7 in the Discord. The Rise Up Discord is a free community for learners at all levels of experience. If you've got a question, if you've got a suggestion, a good joke, word of wisdom, or you just need a second opinion, that's the place to go to meet your future co-founder, your best friend, people across the world. And I promise you, if you go in there and you ask a question, it may not be immediately, but almost certainly somebody will have had the same question and probably has an answer for you, probably even before one of us. But that's where we live too. And if you want to absolutely guarantee you'll get our attention, plus get discounts on classes, coaching, everything else, then you can sign up for a free premium membership trial at our website, theriseupmorningshow.com. And it's free for 7 days. You get all the value, and then if you don't like it, you can leave. But we'd love to see you there. We would love to see you there. And guys, we got about 30 minutes before we take our dogs and ponies.
Well, here's something that
What are you
everybody's
thinking,
going to
Will?
like. BlackRock has expanded their blockchain-based money market to, can I get a drum roll?
Yeah, I almost gave you an ooh-wee.
Solana.
Go.
Wow,
figure.
congratulations, BlackRock. Congratulations, Solana.
Mhm.
Didn't they open some sort of money market the other day and the trading was underwhelming?
I don't know.
There's another one. When
Can't
did
say I
this,
was
is this
paying attention
breaking?
to that. Yeah, this is breaking news.
Okay, there was a
Handful of minutes ago.
There was something that Solana did that Bitcoin has done and Ethereum has done. Maybe it was an ETF style product. I don't know, but it
Oh, are
did
you
like,
talking about the futures Solana ETF that dropped?
I am. It did
You
like
are.
12 million in volume in its first
Yeah, 'cause,
day,
like,
which was
who cares about a futures ETF for Solana? For those of you who
Yeah.
don't know, if you're like, wait, I thought ETFs were like these cool, great, grand things, and isn't it always bullish? There are two types of ETFs. There's a futures ETF, which no one cares about, and there's a spot ETF. A futures ETF is you getting a little piece of paper that says, hey, you have Solana, smiley face. You have Solana, smiley face, and you are either placing a bet that it's going to go up or it's going to go down, and that's all you have. You don't have any exposure to the actual asset itself. A spot ETF, however, you go and you get a little piece of paper and it says this is your share of the, in this case, Solana spot ETF. And then in this case, let's just say BlackRock then goes and acquires some Solana to hold. So a spot ETF actually affects supply and demand, whereas a futures contract doesn't. It's just a useless paper contract that does nothing for the markets. But here's why we're still excited about the futures ETF for Solana, because if you have a futures ETF for Solana, you will one day absolutely have a spot ETF for Solana, assuming, of course, the futures ETF does not get the plug pulled on it early because of an extreme lack of interest.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
I'm telling you there's a chance. So, but the futures ETF for Solana does mean the odds of getting a spot ETF for Solana are stronger.
Will, where did you get that piece of news? And generally
I was
speaking,
like, that
guys,
piece of paper, I was like, my notebook.
Yeah, that piece of paper. How much can I buy that piece of paper
How
for?
much can I buy for that piece of paper?
Where do you get your
Will
news?
Watson
Your breaking
drew
news.
SOL smiley face on it.
My God. It's an NFT. Mint it for the show.
Mint it.
No, just your breaking news. Where do you like to go for it? What sites do you guys use when you're looking for crypto news?
Oh, I mean, the first thing I peruse is the Twitter. I mean, if you're looking for crypto news, there's no place better than Twitter, even though it's a bit of a cesspool, but so is all social media. And yeah, I mean, you could literally start by how I started building my Twitter was I just went into Google and I said, what are the biggest crypto personalities on Twitter? I went and followed all of them. And then eventually you start finding other things. So I go and I follow all of the projects I'm interested in to get the latest updates. And you just over time slowly start to refine your Twitter as people repost and comment on stuff, and you kind of figure it out. And then over the years, I have found other influencers, other people, all that kind of stuff. So, you can just start building, and it takes time to really refine your crypto Twitter news feed.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what is it you've got pulled up here?
This is Crypto Panic. It is a crypto-related news aggregator that collects stories from all over the place, including Twitter and other social media posts, and then a whole host of different various crypto news outlets and stuff. They have a rating system. The rating system is kind of, it's a little bit trolly. It's very deep.
But it's like a social, rating system. And I'm not sharing it on the screen
news.
because it's small text. It's basically just a text feed, headlines.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
You're not missing anything.
it's great. It's fantastic. They've not updated the way that it looks in many years, and it's perfect the way
It's
it is.
helpful.
I look at it every single day, 2 to 3 times a day, just to get a quick scan of everything. So they have a constant feed on one side that is literally everything. You can sort by keyword if you're looking for Solana related news or XRP related news or Bitcoin related news, whatever. And then on the other side, there's a trending section, which has to hit a certain threshold of engagement. And we always joke that Charles is constantly paying for at least one Cardano story to be featured in the trending section at all times, because it seems
And it was
like
me.
it seems like there's always something. And today it's expert analysts watch Cardano whale make massive buy, and that was Will.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Generally speaking, there are other websites too, like CoinDesk, Cointelegraph, but a lot of these, be careful when you're reading news on crypto sites, because a lot of these sites will not very clearly distinguish between what is like a press release that somebody paid to put there and what is their journalistic coverage. They'll put those articles next to each other.
Well, the other thing
And
too
what's
is they like to
Mr.
jump the
Retweet?
gun, because breaking news is where you get all the clicks if you're first. So everyone in crypto, and this is just a news thing, it's not just a crypto thing, but everyone will jump the gun with the headline, and then you'll see that headline, and if you go, that's too good to be true, you should probably see if anybody is talking about it out there in the news section of Google. And if no one is, well, it might not be true.
Well, and grain of salt always. I am reminded of the most recent, most notorious example of a breaking news story that Cointelegraph wrote about, which turned out to be sourced exclusively from AIXBT, which was embarrassing for them.
Oh, did you also see everybody on Twitter being like, Donald Trump put up the white paper for Bitcoin in the Oval Office? And it was the same exact video where he unveils that they took the U.S. Declaration of Independence and put it up on the wall, but they just green screened it and put the Bitcoin white paper, and everyone on Twitter was running, oh my God, he put up the Bitcoin white paper. He's a Bitcoin bull and maxi and all that other kind of stuff. And everyone was like, no,
We are so
relax. Oh my God. That was the last one that people ran with. That was a fake story.
I just have to read this comment. My dad sent me a text this morning about the crypto, so I sold all of it. Thought that was fantastic. We had another really quick question too about do you guys think OTC trading is happening? And I wanted to answer this person's question with absolutely. OTC, for people who don't know, stands for over the counter, and what it is like peer-to-peer, off the market. It's like if I called Alex and was like, hey Alex, can I buy one of your Bitcoin? Can I buy it for $90,000? And he'll be like, 90? Try 91, pal. You negotiate a price. Sometimes it's intermediated by a company like Wintermute that facilitates the service. And large buyers often buy this way because if they just bought at what we call spot, meaning if they went to like Binance or Coinbase and paid market price to buy a lot or of whatever asset, they could print a really big candle and move the market and cause FOMO or fear, essentially wrecking their trade. So that's why they buy it over the counter. It changes hands, doesn't impact the market because Alex isn't like reporting, to Coinbase, hey, my trade went in, it moved, whatever. And according to Wintermute, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find it to be funny, personally, that OTC trading of cryptocurrency is like widely looked at as by a lot of people as being sketchy, when in fact it is the purest form.
Yeah, exactly.
Transacting
Satoshi's
with
vision.
cryptocurrency. It's literally the way it was meant to be transacted, and people like get salty and sussed out when things happen like off of the centralized exchanges.
Isn't that
which we also
sketchy?
talk
Well,
about.
no, it's just one person selling directly to one person.
Right?
It is
That's
as
crypto, baby.
Satoshi intended.
Somewhere he's looking down on us and smiling. Yeah. But OTC
Or he's
trading,
looking down and looking at meme coins and going, God, what did I unleashed upon the
right. What
world?
have you done?
Fart
Um,
coin.
Maybe he gets
Wintermute
some other
reports.
shady shit and he's screaming up at us in anger.
Wintermute reports that year over year, OTC trading has grown significantly. In 2024, it was up about 164% on their markets over 2023. And in 2025, it's projected to grow 313%. So it's absolutely picking up steam and is probably a good indicator of adoption. Adoption by institutional or larger clients specifically. Good question.
Yeah. Guys, I got about 5 more minutes or so, and then I do have to run. Just FYI.
Then tell me, do you have a final thought? Do you have a parting
I still
word of
have
wisdom?
5. I still have 5 or so minutes. I don't have to do a final thought just yet.
I don't have to
You
do
don't
a
have to. You
final
don't have to
thought.
kick me out of here.
Get
Ahead of
out
it.
of here.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
Fine.
I do.
I'll go. I'll leave.
I'm not trying to kick you, man. I'm not trying to kick you. I just, wanted to make sure you had plenty.
I wanted to
of
let's
time.
do this because there was a question at the very beginning. I know we lightly touched on it with Spade when he was here. It was a hell of a question to kick off everything. Basically, just what does all of this gobbledygook, all this Web3, DeFi, blockchain, crypto, et cetera, how is it going to impact the future for everyone? Everyday people, everybody, regardless of who you are and what you do. And I don't think all of us gave our bumper sticker answer to that. And I'd be curious what you guys think, because I have a very specific answer about it, I think.
Well, then, Will, why don't you go first, and we can banter a bit, and then you get out, and we'll
Sure. Yeah,
banter a bit more.
I'd love to go first. Alex, I wasn't listening. Can you repeat the question? I am serious though. My
I will
brain went off
absolutely
on
die
a
on this
tangent
hill.
about some. Well, anyway.
Yeah, Will.
The
I was
question
just
is,
gonna ask, how
what are
do
the
you
key
feel
ways-
about-
Go ahead.
I was gonna troll him, so
I know
you
you
can
were.
ask him the question first.
What are the key ways, Will, that the world will be different after Web3 at scale? How is it actually going to change the world for everyday people? What are some of the ways?
Oh, sure. Well, let's look at some real world examples here. Remittance payments. And Spade mentioned this too. He lives in Thailand. He has family in France. He does cross-border payments all the time. And he gave the great example where if he goes through the traditional financial system, he gets hit with fees of $70 as opposed to just paying maybe like a couple of cents, right? Using crypto. So now imagine you're not the CEO of a crypto company, but you are a blue collar working immigrant from one part of the world working in another part of the world because they offer a much higher salary. Your family's back in your home country. You're not earning a ton of money, but the money you're sending back is worth way more in your home country than where you currently are, which is why you're doing what you're doing to help provide for your family. $70 out of that is a very large chunk of money out of what could be, maybe just $1,000, something like that. And you want that money to go back to your family. So crypto helps provide an environment where you keep money within your hands and within the hands of the people you're trying to get money to, as opposed to middlemen and service people, right? And you can use that in a whole bunch of different examples. Another example I gave that's very finance specific, but I gave it earlier, so I'll retouch upon it, is you create a much more fair financial environment that is also far more accessible to people. If you are in Africa, you might not have access to traditional financial markets. If you're somewhere in Southeast Asia, you might not have access to traditional Western financial markets. If you are in Latin America, you may not have access to traditional banking and loans. But if you have an internet connection, you can get a loan through crypto at a far better rate than you would have before. Because if you have less money, you get hit with higher rates on your loans. If you have more money, you get given more money for free. Essentially, not for free, but less expensive at lower rates, right? Crypto helps level that playing field. It makes it more accessible for you to get money and to build for your family and your community at a fair rate, even if you are not rich, right? Crypto can also help to, I'll give another perfect example in someone's life. You go on Ticketmaster and you go and you buy a ticket for a concert or a sporting event. And the ticket prices have been jacked up because it's something in very high demand. Think of a Taylor Swift concert, or think of like the Super Bowl or something like that. Instead of having these predatory markets where you can then yes, the price of those assets can go up based on market demand, but on top of that, you're going to hit with all these hidden fees, right? So maybe you're already spending a bunch of money on something and you get hit with a whole bunch of hidden fees on top at the end. Say goodbye to that. I'm talking about NFT technology right now. So what if that ticket was an NFT? Yeah, you can buy that on the secondary market, and demand and supply will cause the price to go up and down, but you won't get hit with an additional, we've seen headlines of egregious fees from Ticketmaster. Get rid of those, enjoy life with less expensive. So many things are expensive and only becoming more so. I don't know why my screen here is fuzzy, but are only becoming more so expensive. So let's make them cheaper, right? And then the last thing I'll provide you an example from video gaming. Today, you download a video game and it's software. You don't actually own that game. The game servers get turned off and it's just gone. It's gone. It's kaput. That game doesn't exist. You spent $60, maybe even $70 on that game. But if you had digital ownership via an NFT, you still own it, right? If you can play it on your console, there's a story mode for the game, not like multiplayer, which would have servers, you can still play the campaign. You can still have a good time. You own that. Even though it's a digital version, right? So it's about ownership. It's about lowering the barrier to entry on things. It's about protecting people from predatory services. It's about reducing fees. It's about giving people control and ownership over their money to protect themselves, their families, their loved ones, and their communities. And that's what crypto is all about.
Ooh. Ladies and gentlemen, there he is. William, time to do my face routine. Watson.
That's not what I'm about to do, actually.
That was a comment from Robbie. He said, I think he's got to go do his
to do his face routine. No, I already did that. I did that way earlier.
I could tell, man. You were glowing. You were glowing this morning.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good final thought. I don't think I can top that at all. But
no,
I'm curious to hear your answer, Evan. So I'll stick around and Alex's, and then I'll pop off.
Oh, you really? Okay. Well, then I'll be brief and let Alex go last. I would just say that any job we rely on a computer to do, or excuse me, any job, damn it, rogue myself. Any job we currently rely on a human to do that a computer could do better, more fairly, more accurately, is a good opportunity for Web3, this technology, to innovate and help us improve. The grocer who takes your money at the checkout, the banker who counts out the notes and might make a sloppy mistake at your till. Any person who is doing a job that a machine could do better can be displaced by that machine, and the value the machine creates, because it doesn't need to eat, because it doesn't need to sleep, because it doesn't take holidays off, it can't be bribed, it can't make a silly mistake, when it is a decentralized computer that we can all see, we can all verify, and all trust. That's going to give us a tremendous amount of efficiency and freedom, not just in the ways Will talked about practically, these transactional ways of increasing our freedom with these tools, but freedom of our time, freedom of resources. And I think it'll be one step towards experiencing more fully the goodness of life. Alex, hopefully we didn't rug you with all, we've given 4 different things.
No.
What do you got?
So first, just to comment on Will's thoughts about remittance payments, because that's a really big one. I just wanted to share a couple numbers. that will put this in, I think, better perspective if you've never crunched them or looked at it. Okay. Western Union processes on average between 250 million and 950 million transactions every year.
Damn.
Their revenue last year was over $4.5 billion. Transaction fee of between like $16 and $4 and kind of ranging in and around there. So they made billions off of processing less than a billion transactions. Their numbers are going up year over year because the need of people to send money to other people around the world is a big one. Take your average high speed, high throughput, low fee blockchain and accounting for average gas fees for a single one person to one person raw fungible token transfer transaction fee. So that would be like me sending one SOL to Evan from my wallet to Evan's wallet, or one, I mean, pick anything. One AVAX, one POL, one whatever. Not ETH. ETH, obviously, we know has higher gas fees. Interestingly, still on average, not as bad as Western Union, but more. You could make all of those transactions for the year that cost well into the billions of dollars for Western Union to do for less than $5,000. We pay an unbelievable amount of money every year for a service that does not need to exist anymore by people who are overcharging you to do something that a protocol can handle cheaper, faster, more efficiently, and just overall better, more trusted. Western Union processes transactions at 30 TPS on average, 30 transactions per second. Even your lamest blockchains that have never been tested at volume are doing more than that. Then you take the bigger ones that are being tested at more and more and more volume, and they absolutely dust it. We don't need Western Union. It's a scam. It's a straight ripoff. It's a straight rift. And the problem is that with stuff like that, there's no transparency into how these fees are calculated. They just up rates to make more money, to protect margins, to increase revenue, blah, 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 blah. With a protocol, you don't need to guess. You can check and see exactly what these things are charging. You can opt out of it. There are tons of options, and you can send it some other way that's cheaper. There are plenty that offer gasless transactions now for various types and various methods and all this kind of stuff. That's for me, like that really drives home the single biggest level up in using this stuff that I see every day is, as we talk about how can people make notable improvements to their financial situation, to their financial status. I hear all the time that, okay, one option is to, set aside little bits of extra money to invest, right? That's a go-to piece of advice. It's really easy to look at that and say, well, I don't have any extra money. I paycheck to paycheck, I spend everything on basic survivals. See, dude. And that's fair. The reason that I bring it up is because I guarantee that if you look at the things that you're spending money on that are required, not fun, you're not having fun, just paying for shit you need to pay for, I guarantee someone's taking advantage of you. I guarantee that in some way you're overpaying for something. That's the reason that this system is the way that it is, because we get locked into it and forced to stay there, which means if you're paying for things of necessity, you can be taken advantage of and you won't leave when the experience is bad because you can't, right? Like you can't just opt out of the grocery store. You have the options that you have available to you that are within reasonable travel distance from your home, and that's how it is. The same is true for the dollar system and all things that's attached to it. You're confined by whatever banking options you have, by whoever you can get approved for, a credit card or a charge card through, wherever you can get approved for a loan for at whatever rate you can get approved for, you're locked into all that stuff. And it's very hard to escape trouble you've ever had with any of those finances. That's how this shit's going to change the world. Because the bigger these protocols get, the more user-friendly they get, the more accessible they get, the easier it becomes for somebody to opt out of this predatory, extractive system of payments, locking people into being bled dry constantly just to survive. And every ounce that you're able to inch forward, someone's there to raise the rate on some necessary service that you are required to pay for and squeeze that last little bit of bonus you've ever been able to get away from you. That's why I'm such a DeFi maxi. That's why I am here doing this all the time, because I truly believe that the escape for lots of people who are struggling is to be able to get away from the predatory middle people who just milk them for every penny they have at every chance they get.
Well, and there's a lot of Fugazi stuff happening in crypto that's
Yes.
like really that way still too. Like somebody asked,
Or worse.
do
Or
crypto
worse.
credit cards have better rates? You might think that, but mostly they're offered by Visa and MasterCard.
Yeah,
and
it's the
the
same shit.
feature of crypto is just that you earn some interest back, and crypto.com gets a slice for selling it to you, kind of thing. So
The
you know,
level up would be more, like small local business that sells something that you need could choose to, instead of processing payments
That's
through
right.
MasterCard, Visa, and charging that 3% upcharge for the credit card fee, whatever, starts accepting USDC, and you have the option to simply pay the base network transaction fee to send them stable coins, for example. That you don't need to pay, the 3.5% or whatever to Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, whoever the middle person is. That's what I mean. I don't mean the credit cards, because like Evan said, those are all super centralized. Those are just gimmicks. I mean, the rewards can be good if you're into using a credit card and you're in a position where that's fine and it works for you. It can be nice to earn the rewards that way, but not the same thing. That's not DeFi.
speaking of that's not DeFi, did you just see Moist Mike gave us this comment? World Liberty Financial is to launch USD1, an institution-grade stablecoin fully backed by U.S. Treasuries and cash equivalents. I would be interested to see more. One commenter said, "Why do they always say institutional grade?"
Institutional grade in crypto is quickly becoming the same thing as something in the consumer, market for like products being labeled as mil spec or military grade. Like
I have
myself,
literally never seen
military grade.
military grade. Yeah, mil spec I've never seen, but military grade all the time.
Military,
Looks like it's gonna.
mil spec and military grade are the same thing. And basically, what's funny is that mil spec often just means the cheapest contract available, so it's not even that great. But it's the same thing. Everything's got to be institutional grade because it just sounds good. It's marketing fluff.
Well, and according to the Cryptonomist and Fortune, I went with Cryptonomist because Fortune had a paywall. They've launched on BNB chain and Ethereum a current supply of $3.5 million, and the token is not currently tradable. I'm not sure when it will become tradable, but the smart contract has been deployed, and Binance CEO CZ Changpeng Zhao has confirmed the news. Interesting. I'm not surprised at all, though. If I was a DeFi protocol, I would want a stablecoin to get a piece of that pie.
I think Music Man is just in the comments constantly trying to play the world's biggest game of Made You Look.
I think so too. I was going to say
picking
that.
a random ticker and just saying rocket and nothing's doing anything.
Hit me with the screen share, Alex, real quick, so I can show people every time Music Man posts that. I go to CoinGecko and I look. The first one I saw him say was Litecoin, and I looked, and Litecoin is rocketing. It's up 1.2% on the hour, 1.3% on the day. And like many things, is up between 8 and 10% on the week. Sol has gone up. AVAX has had a 20% week. Chainlink's had a 20% week. But what else was rocketing? I think he said GRX. I think he said I don't know, maybe Cardano.
I don't know.
0.2%. Everything's rocketing. Thank you, Music Man. Also, really quick, speaking of rockets and things that were making us look, what's up with this new Polkadot logo? You see this? Look at this little.
Yeah.
Waiting for it to do it again. Woo! Look at that.
Do you want to guess how many years it's been like that?
Has it really been like that for a long time and I've never noticed?
Oh yeah.
Or maybe I was on like low lo-fi
your
Wi-Fi
computer was
before?
just so bad that it couldn't process that tiny animation, but it's been like that for years.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of things that have been like this for years, we're coming up on what is it, like 2 years, 2.5 years of doing this show in its current format?
December 14th is the anniversary, and we just passed the
Oh,
2
so
year
we
mark
passed
last
it.
December.
Sorry, I didn't get you anything.
It was 6 months ago. Or well, I can't count. It was 3.5 months ago.
Oh man. Well, thank you for sticking it with me, and everybody, thank you for sticking it with us. This is about that time when we're going to give some final thoughts. We're going to ride our dogs and ponies off into the sunset. So if you've got a last minute question, suggestion, good joke, word of wisdom,
Mug. I know.
not even a mug. I saw that.
You can get me anything.
Oh, yeah, sorry, man. Tell me why. If you've got a question for us, then leave it in the comments or jump into the Discord at discord.gg/riseup. Check out the premium memberships if you're interested in classes, coaching, or you just want faster responses from us, or to get into that group of people who are the most involved in our community. Excuse me. Everybody there is great, but those people are exceptional and they're beautiful. You know, if you join the Premium Plus membership, you get a Rise Up Morning Show mug for free, unlike Alex. So do you have a do you have a final thought for us?
Just if you guys are still here and you're still learning and you're still paying attention and you're not checked out, give yourself a round of applause and a pat on the back, because this is the important time. Whether this is just natural market tumult before a bull market continues, or it's the start of a bear, or it's something in between. When prices are what we would call boring, it's the most critical time to pay attention. And you guys are anyone listening, anyone paying attention, anyone continuing to learn and ask hard questions and be critical and all that sort of stuff. You're setting yourself up to be the person that exit liquidity is envious of the next time this shit runs, because you've been here the whole time. And well done. Well done all.
My final thought is we have booked our stay in Toronto with a special shout out and thank you to Joe for the recommendation. She was absolutely on top of it. We would not have found a place so quickly or so comfortably without her. We're going to be there for Consensus the 12th through the 16th of May. So the next task, Joe, is get your brain puzzling about the places that we could host a Rise Up meetup, a brewery, a dog park, a restaurant that doesn't mind people talking loudly. I'm not sure, but we would really love to do
the trifecta of things.
Yeah, I threw the dogs in for you, man. Just in case you missed home, we would love to see you there. We're going to be there, and we'll get all the good coverage thanks to our friends at Polygon, and we'll keep you posted. That's obviously a lot of time, but make your plans now. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, and we'll be in the Discord. We'll post some links from Spade and Neutron there, and that's it, man. That's it. I don't have a good line to end on. Tell me why. Sorry about it. Here's my good line to end on is I have no idea. You know that scene in Willy Wonka when he gets in the elevator, the original one, at the end, and he says, I've pressed all these buttons except for this one. I don't know what this button does. I was recording some new sounds for the soundboard, and I was taking them from our fun video that we did with Will. And so I don't have these buttons labeled yet. The sounds aren't clipped yet, but stay tuned for some new sounds coming to the show, like,
hey there, normies. I have a brand
hey there, normies.
Oh yeah, no, at least a 10x. Yeah, and remember, if you sell, you're a loser.
Loser.
I'm gonna clip. You're a loser. I think I don't know how to sell this thing too, and maybe a couple of other fun sounds coming to the board, but we'll show them to you next time.
You gotta also just my request would be, shit, he rugged us.
He rugged us. Yeah. Okay, you got it. And when it happens, we'll tell you about it right here on the Rise Up Morning Show. Until then, my friends, everybody stay safe, be well,